Imagine a man who changed the world without anyone ever knowing his name. A man who created something so revolutionary, so powerful, that it reshaped the way we think about money, trust, and freedom. And yet, instead of basking in fame or fortune, he chose to disappear, to live a quiet, unassuming life, far away from the chaos he unleashed. What if Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, wasn't a billionaire tech mogul or a secretive genius hiding in plain sight? What if he was just a humble fisherman, living on a remote island, unnoticed by the world? This is the story of Kenji Matsuda, a man who walked away from the greatest fortune in history, who watched the rise of his creation from the shadows, and who ultimately lost it all to the depths of the ocean. But for Kenji, it was never about the money. It was about the idea. Let's dive into the untold story of the man who could have been Satoshi Nakamoto. You hear the waves first, soft and rhythmic, lapping against the shore of a small Okinawan island. The sun rises slowly, casting a golden glow over the water, and in the distance, a lone fishing boat bobs gently on the horizon. This is where Kenji Matsuda spends his mornings, a man who seems to belong more to the sea than to the world beyond it. You see him now, standing barefoot on the deck of his weathered boat, his hands steady as he pulls in the fishing net. His face is lined with age, but his eyes are calm, reflecting the same stillness as the ocean around him. Kenji's life is simple, almost impossibly so. He wakes before dawn, his body moving with the ease of someone who has repeated the same routine for decades. Fishing is not just his livelihood, it's his rhythm, his connection to the world. After a morning on the water, he returns to his small wooden house nestled among the trees. The house is modest, with peeling paint and a garden that overflows with vegetables and herbs. You watch as he tends to the garden, humming softly to himself, his hands working the soil with care. There's a sense of peace here, a quiet that feels untouched by the chaos of the modern world. The locals know Kenji well. He's the kind of man who always has time for a friendly chat, whether it's at the market or over a cup of sake at the small bar in town. They admire his skill as a fisherman and his knack for brewing sake, which he shares generously with his neighbors. But to them, Kenji is just Kenji, a kind, unassuming man who has lived on the island for as long as anyone can remember. There's nothing remarkable about him, at least not on the surface. But as you watch him, you notice something. It's in the way he moves, the way his mind seems to wander when he's alone. There's a depth to him, a quiet intelligence that doesn't quite fit with the image of a simple fisherman. He spends his evenings reading, his small home filled with books on topics that seem out of place here: mathematics, philosophy, even cryptography. He doesn't talk about these things with anyone, and no one asks. To the world, Kenji Matsuda is invisible, just another man living a quiet life on a forgotten island. And yet, there's a secret here, something hidden beneath the surface. You see it in the way he watches the news on his old, flickering TV, a faint smile playing on his lips as the anchor talks about Bitcoin and the mystery of its creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. Kenji doesn't say a word, but there's something in his expression, a knowing look, a flicker of amusement. He turns off the TV and steps outside, the sound of the waves calling him back. To the world, he's just a fisherman, but you can't help but wonder, who is Kenji Matsuda really? You see him now, years earlier, sitting in a cramped room lit only by the glow of an old computer screen. The walls are lined with bookshelves, sagging under the weight of thick volumes on mathematics, cryptography, and computer science. Papers are scattered across the desk, filled with scribbled equations and diagrams, the kind of work that would baffle most people. But to Kenji Matsuda, this is where his mind comes alive. He's younger here, his hair still black, his hands moving quickly over the keyboard as if the ideas in his head can't wait to escape. Kenji wasn't always a fisherman. He taught himself programming in his 20s, back when computers were still a novelty in most homes. He had a natural gift for it, a way of seeing patterns and solving problems that others couldn't. But Kenji never sought recognition. He didn't care about climbing corporate ladders or making a name for himself in the tech world. He preferred to work alone, tinkering with ideas that fascinated him, ideas that no one else seemed to understand. Cryptography became his obsession, a way to create systems that couldn't be broken, a way to build trust where none existed. It was a scam that pushed him over the edge. You see him sitting at the same desk, staring at the screen in disbelief. He had ordered a new fishing reel online, something he'd been saving for, only to realize he'd been tricked. The money was gone, and there was no way to get it back. It wasn't the loss of the money that bothered him most. It was the feeling of helplessness, the realization that the system itself was broken. That night, he stayed up until dawn, pacing the room, his mind racing with ideas. There had to be a better way, a way to create a system where trust wasn't needed, where no one could be cheated. And so, the idea for Bitcoin was born. You watch as Kenji works tirelessly, night after night, writing the code that would one day change the world. He doesn't tell anyone what he's doing. He doesn't need to. This isn't about fame or fortune for him. It's about solving a problem, about creating something that could outlast him, something that could belong to everyone. He writes the white paper in a single sitting, the words flowing effortlessly, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash. He signs it with a pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto, and releases it into the world without a second thought. When it's done, he leans back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. He doesn't expect much to come of it. To him, it's just an experiment, a solution to a problem that had been bothering him. He doesn't think about what it might become, or how it might grow. He doesn't think about the billions of dollars it might one day be worth. He simply closes the laptop, steps outside, and breathes in the salty ocean air. For Kenji, the work is done. The rest, he believes, is up to the world. You see the world change, though Kenji doesn't seem to notice at first. It starts small, with a few online forums buzzing about this new thing called Bitcoin. People are curious, skeptical, intrigued. The white paper spreads quietly at first, passed around by cryptography enthusiasts and tech-savvy idealists. They marvel at its elegance, its simplicity, its potential to disrupt everything they thought they knew about money. But to Kenji, it's just another day. He's out on the water, pulling in his nets, the sun warm on his back. He has no idea that the tiny ripple he created is about to become a tidal wave. The buzz grows louder. You see news articles pop up, headlines asking, "What is Bitcoin?" and "Who is Satoshi Nakamoto?" The forums explode with activity as people begin mining Bitcoin, trading it, experimenting with it. Some dismiss it as a passing fad, a toy for tech geeks. Others see it as the future, a revolution in the making. The price of Bitcoin starts to climb, slowly at first, then faster. People begin to dream of what it could mean. A world without banks, without borders, without the need to trust anyone but the code itself. Kenji watches all of this from the corner of his small living room, the flickering light of his old TV casting shadows on the walls. He doesn't say much as the news anchors debate the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto. Some say he must be a genius, a team of experts, maybe even a government agency. Others spin wild theories. He's a time traveler, an alien, a ghost. Kenji chuckles softly at the absurdity of it all. He turns off the TV and goes back to his garden, pulling weeds and watering the plants. To him, it's all noise, a distraction from the things that really matter. But the world doesn't stop. Bitcoin keeps growing, spreading like wildfire. You see people in crowded conference rooms, on stages, in front of cameras, all claiming to understand what it means, all speculating about its creator. The price skyrockets, fortunes are made overnight, and the hunt for Satoshi Nakamoto becomes an obsession. Journalists, hackers, and conspiracy theorists dig through every clue, every line of code, every email, but they find nothing. Satoshi remains a ghost, a shadow, a name without a face. Kenji doesn't care. He's out on the water again, his boat rocking gently as he casts his line. The ocean is calm, the sky a brilliant blue. He doesn't think about the billions of dollars his Bitcoin wallet is now worth. He doesn't think about the people who would do anything to find him, to claim a piece of his legacy. He doesn't even think about Bitcoin at all. To him, it was never about the money or the fame. It was about the idea, the solution, the challenge. And now that it's out in the world, it no longer belongs to him. You see him later that evening, sitting on his porch with a cup of sake, watching the stars. The world is in chaos. But here, on this quiet island, everything feels still. Kenji smiles to himself, a small, private smile, as if he knows a secret no one else does. The world may be searching for Satoshi Nakamoto, but they'll never find him. He's right here, living a life so ordinary that no one would ever think to look. You see the laptop first, sitting in the corner of Kenji's small home, covered in a thin layer of dust. It's old, the kind of machine most people would have thrown away years ago. The screen is scratched, the keys worn smooth from years of use. To anyone else, it looks like junk, a relic of a time when technology was simpler. But you know what's inside. You know that this battered laptop holds the private keys to the original Bitcoin wallet, the one that mined the very first block, the one that now contains billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And yet, to Kenji, it's just another forgotten object, something he hasn't touched in years. You watch as he picks it up one day, not because he remembers what's on it, but because he needs something heavy. He's heading out to fish, and his usual anchor is missing. The laptop will do, he thinks. It's heavy enough, and it's not like he's using it for anything else. He ties a rope around it, testing the weight in his hands, and carries it down to the boat. The sun is bright, the water calm, and Kenji doesn't give the laptop a second thought as he tosses it overboard. It sinks quickly, disappearing into the blue depths, the rope keeping it tethered to the boat. To Kenji, it's just a tool, a temporary solution to a small problem. The days pass, and the laptop remains underwater, forgotten. Kenji goes about his life as usual, fishing in the mornings, tending to his garden in the afternoons, and sharing sake with his neighbors in the evenings. He doesn't think about Bitcoin, or the wallet, or the fortune that's now tied to the bottom of his boat. He doesn't even remember the last time he opened the laptop, or the last time he thought about the project that once consumed his nights. To him, it's all in the past, a chapter of his life that he closed long ago. Then the storm comes. You see it building on the horizon, dark clouds rolling in, the wind picking up speed. Kenji is out on the water when it hits, the waves crashing against his small boat, the rain lashing at his face. He struggles to keep the boat steady, his hands gripping the ropes tightly. But the storm is relentless, and in the chaos, the rope tied to the laptop snaps. You watch as it sinks into the ocean, disappearing into the darkness below. Kenji doesn't notice at first. He's too focused on getting back to shore, on surviving the storm. When he finally makes it home, soaked and exhausted, he realizes the laptop is gone. He shrugs, thinking it's no great loss. It was just an old computer, after all, something he hadn't used in years. He doesn't know, he can't know, that he's just lost the keys to one of the greatest fortunes in history. To him, it's just another day, another storm, another thing to let go of. And so, he does. He moves on, never once looking back. The air feels heavy, thick with the kind of stillness that comes before something big. You're standing on the shore, watching Kenji prepare his boat for another evening of fishing. The sun is setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. But there's something ominous about the horizon. Dark clouds are gathering in the distance, creeping closer with every passing moment. Kenji doesn't seem to notice, or maybe he does. But he's been through storms before. He ties his nets, checks the ropes, and pushes the boat out into the water. His movements calm and practiced. To him, it's just another night. The first gust of wind comes as he's casting his line. It's sharp and sudden, cutting through the stillness like a warning. Kenji glances up, his eyes narrowing as he studies the sky. The clouds are darker now, swirling together, and the wind is picking up speed. He knows he should head back, but the nets aren't full yet, and he's not one to leave a job half done. He pulls in the line, his hands steady, even as the waves begin to rise around him. The boat rocks harder with each passing minute, but Kenji doesn't panic. He's been on the water his whole life. He knows how to handle a storm, but this storm is different. You see it in the way the waves crash against the boat, higher and harder than before. The wind howls, tearing at the ropes and the nets, and the rain comes down in sheets, blurring everything around him. Kenji fights to keep control, his hands gripping the tiller as the boat lurches and sways. The ocean is alive now, wild and unforgiving, and for the first time, you see a flicker of worry cross his face. He knows he's in trouble. The rope tied to the laptop anchor is the first to go. You watch as it snaps under the strain, the frayed ends whipping through the air before disappearing into the water. The laptop sinks quickly, dragged down by its own weight, vanishing into the depths without a sound. Kenji doesn't notice at first. He's too focused on keeping the boat upright, on steering it through the chaos. By the time he realizes the anchor is gone, it's too late. He curses under his breath, but there's no time to dwell on it. The storm is all that matters now. You see him struggle for what feels like hours, though it's probably only minutes. The boat creaks and groans, the waves battering it from all sides, but Kenji doesn't give up. He's determined to make it back to shore, to survive, and somehow he does. The storm begins to ease as suddenly as it began, the wind dying down, the waves growing smaller. By the time he reaches the beach, he's soaked to the bone, his hands raw from gripping the ropes. He pulls the boat onto the sand and collapses beside it, breathing hard, his body trembling with exhaustion. It's only then that he remembers the laptop. He sits up, staring out at the ocean, the realization sinking in. But instead of panic or regret, there's only a shrug, a quiet acceptance. To Kenji, it was just an old computer, something he hadn't used in years. He doesn't know what he's lost. He doesn't know that the storm has taken more than just an anchor. And so, he gets up, brushes the sand from his hands, and walks home, leaving the ocean to keep its secret. You see him arrive on the island one bright morning, a young man with a backpack slung over his shoulder and a camera hanging from his neck. He's a tourist, like so many others who come to Okinawa looking for peace, beauty, and a break from the noise of the world. He's curious, wide-eyed, and eager to explore, but there's something different about him. He's not just here for the beaches or the food. He's the kind of person who asks questions, who notices things others don't, and it's only a matter of time before he notices Kenji. You watch as the young man wanders into the small fishing village, snapping photos of the boats, the market, the locals going about their day. He stops to talk to people, his Japanese halting but enthusiastic, and they smile at his effort. Eventually, he finds his way to Kenji, who's sitting on the dock, mending a fishing net. The young man introduces himself, his voice full of energy, and Kenji looks up, squinting against the sun. He nods politely, offering a small smile, but you can tell he's not one for long conversations. Still, the young man doesn't seem to mind. He sits down nearby, asking questions about fishing, the ocean, the island. Kenji answers in short, simple sentences, his hands never stopping their work. But then the questions change. The young man asks about Kenji's past, about his life before the island. He asks if Kenji has ever used computers, if he knows anything about technology. Kenji pauses for a moment, his hands stilling, and you see a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or caution. He shrugs, saying he used to tinker with computers a long time ago, but it was nothing important. The young man presses on, asking about cryptography, about Bitcoin. Kenji chuckles softly, shaking his head. "I've heard of it," he says, his voice calm and even. "But I'm just a fisherman." The young man doesn't believe him. You can see it in the way he watches Kenji, his eyes narrowing slightly, his mind racing. He's putting the pieces together, or at least trying to. There's something about Kenji that doesn't add up, something that doesn't fit with the image of a simple fisherman. The way he speaks, the way he carries himself. It's subtle, but it's there. The young man doesn't say anything more, but you can tell he's not letting it go. He thanks Kenji for his time, stands up, and walks away. But he keeps glancing back, as if he's trying to see through the quiet, unassuming man sitting on the dock. Kenji watches him go, a faint smile on his lips. He knows what the young man is thinking. He's seen that look before, the curiosity, the suspicion, but Kenji doesn't worry. He's spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, of blending in, of deflecting questions with a shrug and a smile. To the world, he's just a fisherman, and that's exactly how he wants it to stay. He picks up his net, his hands moving steadily once more, and turns his attention back to the sea. The young man may have questions, but Kenji knows he'll never find the answers. You see the world from Kenji's small living room, the flickering light of his old TV casting shadows on the walls. The news is on, and the anchor is talking about Bitcoin again. It's everywhere now, on the internet, in the papers, on the lips of every financial expert and tech enthusiast. The price has soared to unimaginable heights, and the hunt for Satoshi Nakamoto has become an obsession. You hear the anchor's voice, full of excitement, as they list the latest theories. Some say Satoshi is a reclusive billionaire, others claim he's a rogue government agent, and a few even suggest he's an AI. Kenji leans back in his chair, sipping a cup of tea, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He doesn't say a word. The world is desperate for answers. You see journalists poring over old emails, analyzing every line of the Bitcoin white paper, searching for clues. Hackers try to trace the original wallet, hoping to find a digital breadcrumb that will lead them to Satoshi. Conspiracy theorists post videos online, connecting dots that don't exist, spinning wild stories about secret cabals and hidden agendas. But no one gets any closer. Satoshi remains a ghost, a shadow, a name without a face. And Kenji, he's out in his garden, pulling weeds and watering his plants, completely untouched by the chaos. You watch as the theories grow more absurd. One day, a self-proclaimed expert claims Satoshi must be a team of people, because no single person could have created something so revolutionary. Another day, someone insists Satoshi is dead, and that's why the original wallet has never been touched. Kenji hears these things in passing, snippets from the TV or the radio, and he chuckles softly to himself. He doesn't feel the need to correct anyone. Let them guess, he thinks. Let them search. They'll never find him. The young tourist is still on the island, still watching Kenji from a distance. You see him sitting at the bar in the evenings, talking to the locals, asking questions. He's careful not to push too hard, but you can tell he's still trying to piece it all together. He's convinced there's more to Kenji than meets the eye, but he can't prove it. Kenji, for his part, doesn't seem to mind. He greets the young man with a nod and a smile when they cross paths, but he never gives him anything to hold on to. Just a few polite words, a shrug, and a quiet laugh. It's enough to keep the young man guessing, but not enough to give him any answers. The world keeps searching, but Kenji stays the same. He fishes in the mornings, tends to his garden in the afternoons, and shares sake with his neighbors in the evenings. He watches the news sometimes, amused by the frenzy, but he never lets it touch him. To the world, Satoshi Nakamoto is a mystery, a puzzle they can't solve. But to Kenji, it's just a name, a mask he wore for a little while, a part of his life that he left behind. The world may be searching, but they're looking in the wrong places. Satoshi Nakamoto is right here, living a life so ordinary that no one would ever think to look. You see Kenji in the early morning light, standing on the shore with his fishing net slung over one shoulder. The ocean stretches out before him, calm and endless, the waves lapping gently at his feet. He takes a deep breath, the salty air filling his lungs, and steps into his boat. His movements are slow, deliberate, the kind of rhythm that comes from years of repetition. The world beyond the island is in chaos, but here, everything feels still. Kenji doesn't think about Bitcoin, or the billions of dollars he's lost, or the people who are still searching for him. He thinks only of the sea, the fish, and the quiet life he's built for himself. The day passes like so many others. You watch as Kenji pulls in his nets, his hands steady and practiced. The sun rises higher, warming his back as he works. By the time he returns to shore, the boat is full and the village is beginning to stir. He unloads his catch, exchanging a few words with the other fishermen, their voices low and familiar. There's no rush here, no urgency. Life moves at its own pace, and Kenji is content to move with it. In the afternoon, you see him in his garden, kneeling in the dirt as he tends to his vegetables. The plants are thriving, their leaves bright and green under the sun. Kenji hums softly to himself as he works, a tune that drifts on the breeze. He doesn't think about the laptop at the bottom of the ocean, or the private keys that are gone forever. He doesn't think about the young tourist who still watches him from a distance, or the world that's desperate to uncover his secret. He thinks only of the soil beneath his hands, the plants that grow under his care, and the simple joy of being alive. As the sun sets, you see him sitting on his porch, a cup of sake in his hand. The sky is painted in shades of orange and pink, the ocean reflecting the colors like a mirror. Kenji watches the waves, his expression calm and peaceful. He knows what he's done, what he's created, but he doesn't feel the need to claim it. Bitcoin was never about him. It was about the idea, the solution, the possibility of something better. And now, it belongs to the world. He doesn't need the money, the fame, or the recognition. He has everything he needs right here. The stars begin to appear, one by one, as the sky darkens. Kenji leans back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Somewhere out there, the world is still searching for Satoshi Nakamoto, still chasing a mystery they'll never solve. But here, on this quiet island, the man they're looking for is at peace. He takes another sip of sake, a small smile on his lips, and lets the night settle around him. What do you think about Kenji's story? Let us know in the comments below.